With that, I'd like to introduce our speaker this evening. Planning is a major problem or issue for the city. On one hand, there needs to be new development, new projects. On the other hand, there's a need to protect and preserve our neighborhoods. There is a balancing that needs to take place. For that purpose, the Mayor Garcetti brought back someone who was with the city in the planning department, and he brought him back in September to be the new planning director. So this gentleman is in charge of the whole planning process for the city of LA. And we want to find out from him what his goals and objectives are and how he's going to protect us as we move ahead, especially with two initiatives that are being circulated that may affect what the city is able to do from a planning point of view. I've also asked him to give us a little of his background so we can understand, where he, what his background, where he grew up, fundamentally what has been his experiences getting to where he is now as the head of the planning department, the second largest city in the country. With that, I'd like to introduce Vince Bertoni.
I already got some comments here, so I want to make sure I don't want to lose them. Can you hear me now? Hi. I'm just saying I got some comments already this morning on some projects, so I don't want to make sure I lose them. So thank you, Richard, and thanks for having me here. As Richard mentioned, my name is Vince Bertoni. I was recently appointed planning director for the city of Los Angeles. It was actually in February, so I've been here just a little over 4 months. And as Richard mentioned earlier, he wanted to give you a little bit about my background, and I'm happy to do that. I actually grew up in Northern California on 40 acres, cows, pigs, chickens. So this is very different than where I grew up. I grew up in a very rural place, and I went to college in San Diego and studied geography because I was very much interested in that kind of relationship between people and the environment. I guess I didn't think I was going to be in so many cities after I studied geography. And I started out in Rancho Cucamonga, which is a very fast-growing place in the 1980s. Then I went to Malibu, right when it first became a city. And I worked there for 5 years, my last year as their planning director. So Malibu, as many of you probably know, is a place that is very concerned about growth and development. It's probably the top issue. And there's an extreme amount of concern there about everything that's built. Neighborhood compatibility are the two words that you hear more often than anything there. After there, I went to Santa Clarita, which is again very fast-growing and suburban place, but also a place that had a concern about the environment because there's a river that runs through it, surrounded by mountains. There's a lot of hillsides there. Equestrians are very important there. We have a long history of people with horses in that area, so it was a very interesting place. Then I came to Beverly Hills. Really the first time I worked in a place that was really urban. And Beverly Hills, also, as you can imagine what Beverly Hills is, it's Rodeo Drive, and it's a lot of large homes in the hills and in the flats, but also a lot of apartments and condos in that area. After that, I came to the city of LA, where I was deputy director for 3 years. I was brought here by the former planning director, Gail Goldberg. Some of you may have known her. And then I was recruited by the city of Pasadena to come be their planning director. So I oversaw their planning, building and safety, and code compliance. I've actually been planning director in Malibu, Santa Clarita, Beverly Hills, and Pasadena. So I came back here, and LA is a very different place than other places, right? LA is huge. It's 469 square miles. It's a very large place. You can fit so many other cities within LA. We've got 96 certified neighborhood councils, over 880,000 separate properties, and 4 million people. So it's a big place. It's a diverse place. LA Unified recognizes 93 different languages. And I've heard some statistics that something like 212 languages spoken in people's homes in Los Angeles. We have some of the parts of LA are some of the densest in the nation. In fact, If you go to the Westlake MacArthur Park area, those densities are the highest west of the Mississippi, yet we also have places that have very large lots, in fact, equestrian lots and very large lots. And so we have a lot of challenges. We have one of the most unaffordable cities in America when you look at how much people make versus how much the housing costs are. We have about 26,000 homeless people on the street. Last year was the estimate. We have disparities in lifespan. If you live in Watts, you're going to most likely live 12 years less than if you live in Brentwood. We have economic, diversity and disparities in the sense that you have somewhere about 3 to 4 times more jobs per square mile in Westwood than you do in Boyle Heights. And we're actually become a more stratified city in terms of our age. We're in one end of the spectrum, we're becoming a younger city. At the other end of the spectrum, we're becoming an older city. Between 2010 and 2020, it's estimated that the population of senior citizens, those that would be 65 or older, is going to increase by 45%. So the senior population is a very important increase and a very important part of our city. I've only been here 4 months, back here for 4 months, gone for 5 years, come back for 4 months. A little bit of a time machine in some ways, I will just say. When I left, we talked about mansionization and the first BMO and BHO and Hillside, and now we're talking about that again as we come back, recognizing and working with some of the same people that we worked with last time on that. When I go and I talk to, one of the things I wanted to do when I got here was to really get out as much as possible and talk to folks. And that may be unusual for people in my position. It probably hasn't happened for a while, but I did want to go out and talk. And I think I'm the first one in a while that's actually agreed to talk to everyone, including homeowners groups, not just neighborhood councils and other groups. So I wanted to get out and talk to people. And I can tell you, I hear a lot of things when I go out there, when I talk to folks. I hear a lot about overdevelopment. I hear a lot about insensitive development. I hear a lot of concern about the design and the scale, how development looks, how tall it is. I hear a lot about traffic, and how difficult it is to get around the city. Other parts of town, some parts of the city more than others. Open space, and more specifically the loss of open space. Wildlife hillside protection and wildlife corridors. I hear a lot about wildlife corridors and that's usually when I hear about wildlife corridors, maybe the smaller projects, the single family homes that may interrupt the wildlife corridors. When you're in the hillside, you hear a lot about grading and the trucks going down streets. We may not hear it in the areas that are relatively flat, but I will tell you when you're in the hillside areas, when someone constructs a home, you have to do a lot of grading and there's a lot of big trucks. And that really impacts people. Just the truck trips, the amount of dirt, housing affordability over and over again throughout this city, how difficult it is to afford to be able to buy a house, the ability and the need sometimes to age in place, to not leave your neighborhood or your community, but to still have the housing types that you really need as you go through the various stages of your life. Parts of this city is gentrification is a huge issue. And they talk a lot about how their neighborhoods are changing and how people who are living there are getting displaced. Revitalizing areas that aren't strong economically, that have been losing jobs, that have issues with crime and graffiti and property maintenance. The need for jobs and economic vitality I hear a lot. And really, another thing we hear is this idea of embracing innovation and technology, and that we live in a very different world we did before. When I was here last time, we didn't have Uber and Lyft where you get on your app and you get someone who comes around and picks you up in your car at your house. We didn't have Airbnb where people are renting out your rooms. We had Twitter, but people didn't tweet as much, and so you have this very different way of living. And if you think about planning and the planning department, why there's so much passion around it, because if you think about it, how we experience our city, how we experience our neighborhood, how we experience our community is very much related to how we do planning. One thing that I didn't mention in my background is that when I came here, and I've been a planner, and I mentioned the places that I've worked, but I didn't also mention is I've lived in my house in Los Angeles for 20 years. I live in a neighborhood called Windsor Square. It's near Hancock Park, and I've been there 20 years. I was actually on my neighborhood council, I was on my Homeowners Association board of directors for several years, and the Windsor Square Association. I was also on the neighborhood council as was in formation. I thought that was going to be an easy process to get a neighborhood council. We all did, because we thought it was going to be an easy process because we had a coalition of neighborhood councils, of homeowners associations called the Mid-Wilshire Coalition of Homeowners Association. We actually were one of the first ones to turn in an application to become a neighborhood council. We were one of the last ones to get certified because the process was very contentious as we went through it. And I thought it was going to be an easy process, and it really wasn't. I also was involved in getting a historic district adopted in my neighborhood. I spent time, a lot of time, I wasn't working at the city, I was working actually in Santa Clarita at the time. I spent a lot of time on nights and weekends coming up with pamphlets, giving out brochures to people, coming up with ideas on how to preserve the neighborhood, getting people to sign petitions, then getting people to sign more petitions, and getting people to sign even more petitions. So I kind of know from a first-hand experience what it's like to be active in your neighborhood. I know what it's like to have the stacks and stacks of stuff on your dining room table, and the rest of your family's not very happy with you when you do all of that, and all of the stuff that's in the trunk of your car that you drive around and you keep with you. So those are some of the things that I kind of understand as I look at what we're doing in planning, because I don't just have a role in terms of a professional planner. I've had a role, really spending a lot of years trying to really protect my neighborhood. What we do in planning is because we have this incredible role in terms of how the city looks and feels, is we have to balance a lot of competing interests and diverse needs sometimes. And I know that the needs are very different. I remember being in my neighborhood association board of directors, and those viewpoints could be all over the place sometimes. Sometimes we were very unified. Sometimes we were very, very clear, and sometimes we weren't. But that's what it's like, I think, in a city like LA.